There are only 4 things you need to get perfect webcam image quality on stream, and those are positioning, lighting, settings, and your webcam of choice. But that last one is actually the least important, so we're going to focus on the first 3 mostly, because if you optimize those, then even a $50 webcam can look better than a $300 webcam. So starting off with positioning. Ideally, you want your webcam at eye level, just above it or just below it. Another thing is you don't want your webcam too close to you. A little bit too far away might be okay, but too close, you don't want your face to take up the entire frame. You wouldn't want someone right up in your face in real life, and that's kind of the same effect that you get. So either move the webcam back or scoot back yourself. For the most part, this is actually really difficult to achieve because if you're on a laptop, then you're probably going to be looking kind of down and then you're going to get an up the nose shot. You really don't want that. And if you're just sitting at a desk like me and you've got some big monitors, these aren't even really that big. There's like 23 or 25 inches or something like that. You put the webcam on the top of the monitor, tilt it down, and it reveals a lot in the background and your floor that you don't probably really want. And it's just kind of a weird angle if you're like constantly always looking up. It doesn't look terrible, but it's not great. So there are a bunch of different little tripods that you can get. I got this one from Araday. I'll go ahead and link it. This is really sturdy and it's adjustable. I do think it's a little bit too tall and bulky, but if you do have some room on your desk, you can kind of move this out, stretch it out. It holds its shape pretty well, and then you can make it so it's not too tall. And this is adjustable on the top. You can just kind of move this ball head however you want to. So that's something that I really like about this stand. And positioning is also going to be very important if you're going to be using a green screen. Personally, if I could go back, I probably will get one of the normal green screens because they come from the ground up. And usually there's a little bit of a gap that I have to like crop in a little bit to get rid of that. But if you're going to be using a green screen, this is even more important to get that straight on shot so that you're not pointed down and there's some of the floor showing, or if you're pointed up and there's some of the ceiling showing. Next, let's get into lighting. And this is actually the most important one. The webcam I'm using is the Razer Kill Pro Ultra, but it's not just the webcam itself that's making the image look as good as it does, because these lights, I'm going to turn them off right now. Boom, this looks terrible. The quality and the colors on my face, terrible now. The grain has increased. I look kind of like a silhouette, and I have that small light in the background, which is actually still useful, and a little bit of light coming in through the window. I have actually curtains over it, but I look like a silhouette, and this is just not the way to go. So lighting is incredibly important. So the lights I use are from Elgato. As you can see, the Elgato key light air, and ring light. You don't need all 3 of these. In fact, I'll go ahead and demonstrate just using the ring light. This is the one that I have straight on. If I increase the brightness of this, something like that, then you can have a really good shot even with just one light, as long as you have that one right in the center. Elgato lights are amazing because they have the app. The ring light in particular has buttons on it so that you can actually increase the brightness and the color temperature in case the app is having issues, and the app does have issues a lot. This is 2500 lumens, so if you're looking for a ring light, that's about a good number to look for, but I'm actually only having this at about 50% right now, so you don't really need it that bright depending on what webcam you have. Some webcams like the Logitech C920 or other webcams with smaller sensors, you might need more light and crank it up a little bit higher, but for this will just really just blow out the highlight, so don't really need all of that. But what happens when you add the other lights in, like I'll add this key light air, and then I'll add the key light, it fills things in. Go ahead and drop this down because it's a little bit too bright now. And basically, lighting will fill in all of the little creases and crevices of your face, make you look younger. That smooth, soft, even effect while still having sharpness is something that the Elgato lights do really well. They have soft and even light. So I've linked all 3 of these lights. If you just want to get one, I'd get the ring light. If you want to get 2, I'd get 2 key lights. Now, most webcams actually do not do that well with low light in general, but also low light in the background. So if I turn this light off and turn these other lights on, with this webcam, it's not too big of an issue, but with the darker background, especially if it was nighttime, then you're going to get a lot more grain in the background, especially if you have a webcam that doesn't have great noise reduction filters. So that's why I like to have another light back there. The light back there is the Logitech Litra Beam LX. I like that light for the RGB capabilities of it. And with that backlight on, it really just separates the subject, me, from the background. And because this webcam actually has really good bokeh, it's actually a really nice and fun effect. All right, so we've got positioning, we've got lighting. One more thing on both of these because they actually work together. You want to be facing your brightest lights. You don't want them behind you. If it's to the side, it's not too big of a deal. If there's another light from the side, you still want the brightest ones in front of you. If your brightest light is to your back, then you're gonna look silhouetted. It's not gonna look good. So if you can't afford a more expensive light, or you don't have the room for it, or whatever the case is, if you can face your window, that can get you some soft, even light that can really help you out. Actually, one other thing on positioning is if you have a ring light, the catch light is going to get in your glasses if you wear glasses. In fact, the lights from all of your lights are going to get in your glasses. You can see all three of them. So you want to place them a little bit up. You place them right head on, it's going to be a problem with glasses. Just put them a little bit higher than you are and you should be fine. Now for settings. This is also really huge and it's going to differ depending on what type of webcam you're using. So I'm going to demonstrate this in a couple webcams, the Razer Kill Pro Ultra and also the Logitech MX Brio that I have right here. Now you can control basically every webcam in OBS, Open Broadcaster Studio, but some webcams come with specific software and that software gives you more functionality than what you can get in OBS. First, I'm going to demonstrate how to maximize your settings in OBS, Open Broadcaster Studio. And if you're using something like Zoom or some other thing like Microsoft Teams or something like that, what you want to do is you want to change all of your settings. And when you're done, over here to the right, click Start Virtual Camera. And then in whatever software you're using, as your webcam source, instead of whatever webcam you're using, like the C920 or the Razer Kill Pro, you're going to select OBS Virtual Camera. And that will allow you to utilize all of your settings that you changed. So let's start off with this webcam. This is the Logitech MX Brio. I also have the Razer Kill Pro Ultra. So if you want to change the settings, first you go over to the scenes, you pick whatever scene you have, you add the webcam if you have not with this plus button on the lower left, and then you go to video capture device. You can create new, or you can add existing if you've already had one. And then if you create new, then you can call it whatever you want. I'll call it webcam 2. And then you can add whatever webcam you have plugged in. Now let's start off with the Logitech MX Brio. So you can either double click this or you can click it once and then go to properties. Either one will work. Now you're going to go to, before you click configure video or anything like this is where you can select the frame rate and the resolution. So right now I have this at 4K, which is 3840 by 2160, and it's 30 frames per second. That's as high as it can go. But if I wanted the image to be smoother, and this is something that I think that the Razer Kill Pro Ultra, probably one of the only real weaknesses of it, is it's not particularly smooth, even at 60 frames per second. The MX Brio, you can set it to 1920 by 1080, 60 frames per second. And then you also can change the video format. If you have the availability to use YUI2, it is the best looking one. It's an uncompressed format, but I could talk about the specifics of that in a different video. But anyway, I'm going to set that to YUI2 right now. And you can drag this. Once you click it, click this, drag over here. Now we're going to get into the more advanced settings when you click configure video. And unfortunately, I can't really make this much bigger, but I can zoom in on it a little bit. In OBS, for the most part, you're only going to really want to touch 3 settings. There's other ones that you can touch also, but I really only like to mess with 3. And these 3 are first on camera control, exposure, and then on video proc amp, gain, and white balance. Exposure is basically shutter speed. Now, unfortunately, you can't see what the exact shutter speed is. I'll explain how shutter speed actually works when I get into the specific software, but you can't see it in OBS. But basically this makes it so the webcam takes in light for a longer or shorter period of time. So if you move it to the left, then it takes in light for a shorter period of time and it makes it darker, but it also makes the image a little bit choppier because it's going to be taking in light for less time. So it doesn't have as much time to like combine the image and like blur it all together. Basically, if you have a lot of movement while it's still taking a long time to produce that image, it will add like a motion blur effect, just because that's just how shutter speed works. And if you make it like this, if you drop it lower, then it'll be darker and it'll be crisper, but also choppier. So there's also gain. This is the sensitivity to light. This will increase the brightness also, but it will increase the amount of grain that's in the image. So it does it in a different way. There's the sensitivity light and the shutter speed, which is how long it's taking in light, which was the exposure. And then there's also the white balance. I got this at 4137. Just remember that. This will make it a little bit more blue. This will make it a bit more orange and red. So that you can leave it on automatic if you want to, but personally, I don't like to do that because if your lighting scenario changes, especially if you have recording and it's daytime, then when it gets darker, the sun gets a little bit more yellow and then your white balance is going to be pretty unpredictable. And also with this webcam specifically, there is backlight compensation. I like to turn that off. And also what this does is it makes the 60 frames per second actually enabled. Well, I've talked about that in a different video in my review of the Logitech MX Brio. Anyway, this is the way that you actually want to start this. First, drop the gain down to 0 because you want the lowest amount of sensitivity to light so that you can adjust everything in the exposure, which is the shutter speed, first. So you want to get that as close to how you want. So -6 is a pretty good spot for me. -5, you just want to see the motion blur. If it's too much motion blur, it's not the way. Decent amount, natural motion blur, I really like that a lot. So we need to make this a little bit brighter. Go over to video proc amp, increase that gain. You don't want to increase it too much to the point where it's overblown or where there's too much grain. So I find, let's see, around like 48 or something like that. Looks pretty good from here. Now, white balance. I have this on automatic. Easy. Honestly, just look behind you and see, does it look really accurate? I'd say it's a little bit too yellow. So let me take this off. And then right now it's a little bit too blue. So let me get it kind of right in the middle. I think I had 3147 or something like that. Let's see, or I don't remember exactly what the number was, but you can kind of just do this by eye. This looks pretty good. Something like that. This looks pretty good. It looks about like what I see. And that's really all you want. It doesn't have to be ultra precise. Because it's a webcam, it's not like you have like super advanced white balance settings like you have on like a normal camera. But really, that's all you need. There are other settings that you can change here, but honestly, you're gonna get a pretty good shot just with those. I'm gonna go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so that you can see. And really, that's all you need. Another way that you can change settings is with specific software that comes with the webcam itself. So this comes with a lot of the newer webcams like Logitech MX Pro, the Razer Kill Pro Ultra, the Elgato Facecam Mark II, and Facecam Pro. But depending on the webcam, you can get some very specific settings that you can't do in OBS. So first, let's do the Razer Kill Pro Ultra. I'm going to open Razer Synapse right here. With most webcam software, you cannot preview it while it is open in OBS itself. So what you're going to need to do is select the webcam in OBS and then disable it. The way you do that is you click the webcam and then you click deactivate right here. But let me go ahead and back. And then you can click preview right here on the bottom right of this program. All right, so now reconnect. Now, this is a Razer Kill Pro Ultra. There's not a whole lot that I need to do anymore because I already changed the settings manually, but I'm going to skip a lot of the advanced stuff, just take the basic stuff. So here's the ISO, which is the gain, the sensitivity to the light. So as you can guess, this is going to make it darker, less grain, but it's a little bit too dark, of course. Future me here. Shutter speed is the amount of time that a camera takes to process a frame. So if it's a shutter speed of 1/60, I'll have that right here. That means that every 1/60th of a second, it is going to be taking in light for that period of time, and then it's going to make a frame out of that image. So that means you can have a maximum frame rate of 60 frames per second because it takes a whole 60th of a second to take in that light to make that frame. If you move to the right, make the denominator smaller. This is taking in light for more time. So this is 1/30th of a second. It's taking twice as long to let in light, so it's brighter. If you move it to the left, then it's taking in less light. So example, for 1/120, it's only taking in light for 1/20th of a second. Super small period of time. That's all the light it gets. It's got to make the image. So it's going to be a lot darker. I have the shutter speed at 1/50. Generally, it's a good idea for the motion blur to look natural to have the motion blur at 1/60 if you're going to be 30 frames per second, doubling the shutter speed of the frame rate. Once you get to 60 frames per second, you don't need to do that anymore. However, with this webcam specifically, I find it so choppy when you have it at 1/60 that I've been experimenting with 1/50, and that's actually worked out pretty well for me. But anyway, the same thing that we're going to do. We want to get the best lighting that we can get as far as the motion blur and as far as decent amount of light with the shutter speed first. So 1/50, and then you change the ISO, which is the sensitivity to light, and this one actually cranks up quite a bit. I find 400 is actually pretty good. 1/60 might be a little bit better for me actually, simply just because of it makes the highlights not get as blown out, but at the same time, I can also just decrease my lighting a little bit. Now, something that's really cool about this webcam is that it just takes in so much light because the aperture is so wide. Then turn this over to 1/50, and it looks really good. Good amount of natural motion blur. It's a little bit choppy in terms of the actual frame rate itself, but something that's cool we can do up here is in processing. This is where we can change the frame rate and the resolution, so we can actually just go ahead and demonstrate. This is going to be at 1080p, 60 frames per second, and it's going to look a lot smoother and it looks really, really good. But now, if you're going to have it at 60 frames per second, remember you need this shutter speed to at the least be at 60 frames per second for the true 60 frames per second footage. Anyway, like I said, exposure, ISO, and then white balance. Let's go ahead and do that. Also, we got that frame rate and the resolution. We did that. Image, this is where you would do this, and you can go over to white balance, and I have this exactly 4470. Make it cooler, make it warmer, just like I said. Whichever looks natural to you, you can get this exact sliding. And I already forgot what it was on before, but you can also set this to automatic if you want. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of it, especially if you have kind of extreme colors, like I have that blue back there. Whatever works for you, and I'll have this at about here. Looks pretty good, 4320. Now there's other effects that you can add. There's HDR effects, lens distortion compensation. This is actually going to make it so that there's less of a bend on the edges of the screen, which is something that I don't really like. It looks kind of like a GoPro, and this will zoom it in a little bit. You can see on the bottom here, it will show you the FOV. And then there's noise reduction filters, because some webcams have really good noise reduction filters. Some of them don't. You see this looks a little bit more grainy and gritty with those off. So putting these on, it softens that up a little bit and just looks like a really good image. Looks like a legitimate mirrorless camera. So let's go ahead and crank this back up to 4K 30 frames per second. And then I'll go ahead and put this at 1/50. And now this webcam image quality just looks amazing. Now I'm not going to do the entire thing with every software. Now with excellent positioning, lighting, and settings, your webcam is going to look way better than it normally would. But all webcams are not created equal. There's still some that are going to look better than others. This is the Razer Kiyo Pro Ultra, 4K 30 frames per second. This is the Logitech MX Brio, set it to 4K 30 frames per second. It's just not quite on the same level, but there are things that this does that the other webcam doesn't do, like the background. My trophies are a lot sharper in this webcam because it doesn't have that level of bokeh. I will be making another updated video of the best webcams on the market, so I'll go ahead and link that when it's done. But the TLDR is this webcam, the Razer Kiyo Pro Ultra, is the best webcam that I've ever used. It looks good not just for a webcam, but for a camera, period. There are some shortcomings with the device. I think the autofocus isn't the best, but I will make a breakdown of all the best webcams on the market. So if you're interested in that, then consider subscribing to the channel, because I am working on that really hard. All right, so now you can go ahead and implement these tips to look better on stream, whether it's Twitch or Zoom or whatever you're using. And I'll see you in the next review.